All right, we're rolling. We're here with Alex Feinberg. Alex, what's going on, man?
Just hanging, finished up a leg day, finished up some good dinner like I always do, enjoying everything in Austin.
Love it.
Were you was it a leg day at Squatch, Big Tex? Where were you lifting?
Leg day. We Squatch is when I have appointments. For people listening, Squatch is an outdoor gym in Austin, sun, vitamin D, saunas, ice baths if you want to take them. I don't. But Big Tex is more for like meatheads, bodybuilders, power lifters, and it has some of the equipment that I need as my body's getting old and breaking down.
I've seen some of the biggest people I've ever seen in my life in Big Tex. There are some guys in there who are absolutely huge.
Oh yeah, there's guys who they'll there's some guys who deadlift next to me will deadlift over 600 pounds every week.
Wow.
Like you guys don't ever do light weeks? You're like, no. Like, okay.
Yeah. Well, it's cool because it's like you contrast that to a gym like a Lifetime, right? That has every single amenity you can imagine, sauna, steam room, etc. Great amenities. But the culture of a gym is so important, right? Just by being around people that would go to a Big Tex, it's like you're naturally probably going to squat a little bit more, deadlift a little bit more. Like that, the environment matters tremendously. Do you agree?
I got kicked out of my gym in San Francisco for deadlifting aggressively. Yeah.
Too much grunting or what?
Oh, I don't know. I guess you were not supposed to drop the deadlift bar on the platform, and because it was downtown San Francisco, probably one of the only nice places in downtown San Francisco, to be frank. And the gym's on the 6th floor. They have hotel rooms on the 5th floor, but there's a deadlifting platform. So I'm like, well, you deadlift on the deadlift platform, right? Yeah. Anyway, I was using a hex bar and I dropped the hex bar on my last rep and it chipped the wood in the center of the platform. And I didn't say anything because at the time I'm like, well, I did the thing I was supposed to do. So if it broke, it's just like wear and tear of the gym.
Right.
And then there was some report filed and I had to it was super serious because this club, they hosted the US Open. It's very fancy, certainly by San Francisco standards. But even by US standards. And so they were just they thought I was riffraff, I was there on an athletic scholarship and, it's old boys and I didn't really show them the respect that they thought they deserved. And so they suspended me for a month.
Damn. Now it's just a good story.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the athletic scholarship. We know you played some college ball and then got drafted to play professional baseball. Maybe we could just for the audience get some of your backstory because you've got an amazing array of experience here that we'd love to dive into.
Yeah, I'll give you the 180-second background of Alex Feinberg. So
love it.
Grew up in California, wanted to be a professional baseball player. Understood math more than people when I was younger, which is common with a lot of people on Twitter. And so, every high school kid wants respect, wants admiration, and I wasn't able to get it with my lack of social skills, but I thought that maybe if I worked really hard and became an elite athlete, then that would be the avenue for me to get both respect for my peers, but also make money professionally. And so I set out to become the best baseball player I possibly could, even though as a freshman I was 5'9", 150 pounds, not particularly strong or fast. First game in front of my varsity coach, I made 2 diving catches in the first inning. One of which was the best catch I ever made probably in my life. And so from that point forward, I got on his radar, started playing with more elite people in high school and noticed that I was massively undersized, way too slow. So I kept working hard, still got good grades, ultimately got a scholarship offer to Vanderbilt before they were as good as they are now. No chance they'd ever recruit me now, but back then they did. Played there, started there as a second baseman and third baseman for 4 years. I always tell people that my most valuable class at Vanderbilt, despite the fact that I was an economics major and graduated with honors, was baseball. Reason being, baseball taught me group psychology. It taught me primal psychology. It taught me the way people think in an illogical fashion. And I always paid close attention to why are people doing what I thought were illogical things. After hitting my head against the wall for a few years, I realized, it's because humans are primates and we think primally. And that's why people give the benefit of the doubt to tall, good-looking people and create rules that are enforced differently for every person on the receiving end of them. And so as I started noticing these patterns in college, I decided that no matter what in the real world, I was going to continue to train, continue to work out, get jacked, because I thought that was the easiest path for me to guarantee that my income was reasonable as an adult. I didn't really know that much about business though, and I didn't know that much about the economy, but I did know a little bit about baseball. And I got drafted as a senior. Figured, well, I'm going to play professionally because why not? I don't really know what else I would do. Played professionally for a couple years. Became obvious that I was getting to the end of the road in my career there, and considered a few opportunities after baseball, one of which ended up being working for the conspiracy theorist hedge fund manager in Hong Kong, who asked me if I wanted to work with him after speaking to me for several hours about human psychology. So I moved to Hong Kong in 2010 when I was just turning 24 years old. He got me into Federal Reserve conspiracy theories, as well as some other conspiracy theories that I'm still uncertain of, but I am certain about the Fed conspiracy theory that the Federal Reserve was created as a private bank to stabilize the commercial banking system and investment banking system. And working at that hedge fund, I realized, oh, because the Fed's structured like this, they're going to keep interest rates low indefinitely, and the tech sector is going to do really well in a low interest rate environment. And so after working for him for a year, I decided I want to go back to Silicon Valley. And I had thought, it'll be a good environment to like raise money and create some, billion-dollar company, for eyeballs and clicks, and they'll just pay me money for that. Well, it turned out to be a little bit harder than that to make money. I ended up working at Google for 6 years in a few different roles. And then in 2017, when the crypto market started taking off, I realized that everything that the crypto people were passionate about, hard money, ending the Fed, were things that I was passionate about 6 years prior. I just never bought Bitcoin at the time because I thought the government was going to make it illegal. I was literally having bullion shipped to my office at Google in 2011 when Bitcoin was like $100. And so in 2017, when the crypto market started taking off, made a little bit of money there before I lost a little bit of money, and decided I wanted to bet on that space. I decided that the space was going to be growing so fast that I didn't actually need a job offer lined up. I was going to be comfortable networking on my own and find my way into a decent position. And I ended up doing that in June 2018. I took a position as director of business development at a local San Francisco-based exchange. And then when I realized that everybody who was getting paid decent money in crypto had a meaningful Twitter following, I realized that I wasn't going to have that much value as a sales representative in the crypto space unless I also had a decent Twitter following. I struggled in 2018 to build my my brand because I was like actually kind of tweeting the way I tweet now, but I didn't have anybody following me. There was not a single reason for them to follow me. And I decided in 2019 to be a little bit more focused on it. Bought Ed Lattimore's book, decided that my approach to fitness was a lot more efficient than anything that I realized it could be in my early and mid 20s. I was putting way less effort in, enjoying every meal, not counting calories, and getting much better results than I thought were even possible. Literally, I was like, is somebody putting steroids in my water? Like, where is this ab definition coming from? I'm not supposed to have these. And I just decided that I had a good message that, we have, over 100 million obese Americans who think that dieting and exercise needs to be a certain way. And, what if I could reach just 1% of them to teach them, no, like literally, this is what I do. I don't count calories. I don't hate my workouts. I listen to my body and look at how good it works.
The simplicity in the message is amazing. I think there's something to that a lot of people just try to overcomplicate these things. And once you've had enough experience, probably maybe it's your athletic background. Like, Brett and I both played baseball too. So like you get used to using your body and get comfortable with yourself where you just kind of have that intuition a bit. But it is, for people who are just getting started, it's obviously a lot harder, but just the simple approaches really do go a long way.
Well, the challenging thing is how do you create a peer-reviewed study around what I do? Because I eat intuitively, right? I teach other people how we eat intuitively. And how are you going to, raise funds to say, oh, intuitive eating is more effective than, X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, first of all, it's not, because most people are overweight because they eat intuitively. Like their intuition tells them to just eat Doritos all the time and like drink beer.
Yeah.
And so there's rules that you need to apply to the intuitive eating for it to have good results. Otherwise, you're just going to have the exact same results that you've always had. And so in order to administer an intuitive eating study, it would require that you teach the participants to eat intuitively, probably the way I eat. And you monitor them to ensure that they are in fact eating intuitively. And if they decide they're not eating intuitively, they need to declare that so they can remove themselves from a study. It's much easier to create a scientific study around, Joey ate 1,300 calories a day for 3 weeks and he lost 4 pounds, because you can measure everything, right?
Right.
It can't be measured as easily. So it's not as, it's like trying to plug an Android into an Apple charger. It's like they're not compatible systems of logic, systems of approach. And so, that's kind of the bro science aspect to it. It's like it literally will never be peer reviewed. It's not peer reviewable. The way that we go about doing it can't be tested and replicated the way caloric-based systems are. And so because of that, nobody's going to be teaching it in medical school. Doctors are going to think it's bogus, even though doctors ask me for fat loss advice. They're never going to teach it because it's just not a model that you can make, a university professor an expert in to say, okay, go teach this, right?
Okay.
Learning your own body and understanding the cravings that you have. I'm convinced almost anybody can do it. You just need to have certain things taken care of in order for it to work appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Alex, from your perspective, where do you think we went wrong in regards to food, diet, nutrition, et cetera?
Processed food. And, I like capitalism, obviously, but it's a function of capitalism because higher profit margin foods are the ones that are shelf stable, right? If I'm trying to sell a product, I want that product to be available on the shelf as long as possible until somebody buys it. Otherwise, if nobody buys it, that's going to drive up my costs, right? Is because it goes bad in like a couple of days. So you need to sell it. And if you don't sell it, you're eating the cost. All right. So I guess you got to sell it at a higher price point. Meat to a lesser extent. The most shelf stable things are Doritos. Buy a bag of Doritos in January, you can eat it in August. Yep. They're still like good. They haven't gone bad. I mean, they're already bad, but they haven't gotten worse. And so because of that, it's a lot easier to distribute those for profit. And then you could throw on chemical engineering, flavor engineering, and they become really addictive. You pair that with a sedentary culture that, doesn't have people doing manual labor to quite the extent they used to. And all of a sudden you have a country with, I would estimate, over 50% adult obesity rate at this point.
What, you mentioned in your Vanderbilt story that baseball was the best class that you took, and a lot of it had to do with the psychology. Where did that play itself out in whether it's what you're doing now or like when you were working at the crypto exchange or the hedge fund? Like, where did you really use that, and like what were some of the things that baseball taught you?
So I grew up, people who've seen me tweet about my dad, he's like a Jewish intellectual guy, kind of looks like Noam Chomsky, but like 20 years younger. And maybe looks like Noam Chomsky did 20 years ago, is probably more accurate. He doesn't look disheveled like Chomsky does now, but and so I always thought like people are rational, adults are rational. When you the real world, people are going to be rational. And then when I was spending all this time around baseball players, I'm like, no, that's completely wrong. Like, they're not rational. They think heuristically. They have heuristic models to determine what's true. And for several months, if not years, I was like, well, how do I think like them? If I want to get along with them, or if I want scouts to notice me, I need to know how these people think. Then I realized they think through heuristic shortcuts. Oh, this person looks good in a baseball uniform. He must be a good player. He looks confident. He must be good. And I realized like, oh, people don't actually have the time to think through things analytically. So they just make through all these heuristic shortcuts. And then I noticed that, oh, we have a good looking dude who's holding coffee in his hand, giving a presentation to my finance class. And literally I would not care what he's actually talking about, I buy from him, right? Because I trust that he knows what he's talking about. So I thought in my head, I would literally buy whatever this person said. What and why is that? Oh, because he's tall. I don't know if he's tall, but he's good looking. He speaks well. He wears a suit well, and he has a cup of coffee in his hand. So he conveys professionalism, work ethic, and confidence, as well as some degree of health. And so I realized, like, if you bring all those things to the table, it's very hard for people to say no. And to the point where when I was getting no traction trying to get my job at Google, I convinced myself. I turned down job offers. I was living with my mom at the time. I was turning down like decent job offers to get into sales in Silicon Valley because I was convinced that I was going to talk my way into Google. I was going to get an elevator pitch and do it. And I finally, after like 2 months trying, I finally got invited in for breakfast by a Vanderbilt alum who introduced me to a manager and a sales director there. And literally in 15 seconds, I elevator pitched my way into a job, like exactly the way I mapped it up. I wore a custom tailored suit that I got in Hong Kong. I spoke articulately, I spoke directly, I spoke honestly, but I spoke confidently. And, I had to go through the interview process, but it was really just a formality. They're not supposed to tell you this, but my first manager told me during my interview, I want to hire you. I just need to make sure you're smart enough to do the job. Right. So they asked logics-based questions, which I can obviously do well in. And so, realizing that aesthetics matter a lot more than they're going to teach you in the university system helped me get that job at Google. Basically, it's your resume verification, right? You say you work hard. Do you look like you work hard? Well, if there's a mismatch, people, even if everything you put on your resume is true, they may not believe it, right? And so it gives an in-person mechanism for validating the story that you tell about yourself. And that's why good-looking people make more money than not good-looking people. And frankly, being good-looking in many ways is an intelligence test, because if you can recognize patterns and change your actions to benefit yourself based on what these patterns are telling you, you should be good-looking. It makes everything in life easier.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that? I feel like I know what you're going to say, but for the audience, do you firmly believe that looks and aesthetics can be improved for anyone?
100%.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was good looking when I was younger because I was fat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, good looking for most people is don't be fat and have decent skin.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden you're good looking, and there's certain things. Okay, hair loss can be an issue. Messed up teeth can be an issue. But as long as you have like a decent amount of hair, or you're just totally bald and you're just owning it, your teeth are like not totally jacked up, then being good looking comes down to not being fat and having good skin.
Yeah, I feel like some of these like tech CEOs are almost the perfect example. And it's not to say they probably haven't gotten work done, but they do all have like these intense personal trainers, like Bezos. Like if you look at him when he was 20 versus what he looks like now, it's like complete 180.
Yeah, and he's also older and cares more about his health. Same with Elon Musk, for that matter. But yeah, it's like one thing that I've always done is I've switched from job to job, sector to sector. Is I was never concerned about getting promoted at any job that I was at. I was always concerned about building my escape and stuffing as many things as I could in my in my refugee bag that I could use with me at my next destination. And so the things in my refugee bag are sales skills, understanding people's emotions, which goes hand in hand with sales skills, but then also presenting myself well, right? Having a decent resume is important, but being aesthetically pleasing helps seal the deal.
Yes.
So everybody should have, right? It's terrible when people get into stressful work situations. They end up sacrificing their sleep. Maybe their diet gets bad. Maybe they start drinking a little bit more. And all of a sudden, 6 months later, if they end up losing their job, they look kind of disheveled, right? Nobody's going to take a chance on you if you look like you performed the role poorly. And most people are not aware of the fact that their response to stress actually validates their employer's decision in the eyes of a third party who doesn't actually know the real details. And so that's the way you can protect yourself against being taken advantage of by your employer is to always be good looking, speak well, and be confident, because they can fire you, but you'll get a job in 2 weeks. You're fine.
It's such a unique way to look at things that you're just not taught in business school.
Well, it's just honest.
Yeah, it's honest. That's it. People, yeah, it's honest.
Right.
Alex, at what point for you did you realize that tech and crypto wasn't ultimately the path, and the frontier forward was making money off the internet and the Twitter brand that you've built out for yourself? When did that click for you?
It was enjoyable. You know, it was like I could see a quasi final destination from it. Where with tech, you know, I was never at like a rocket ship startup where I'm like, oh, I'm going to get several $1 million of equity, right? With crypto, I bought crypto, but like same, I was not at a rocket ship startup where I'm like, oh, my equity is going to be paying me millions of dollars. With running my own business, what I realized was, well, you know, am I going to make millions of dollars from this? Not the way I'm doing it right now, I'm not. But I mean, not in like a single year anyway. But it does afford me geographic flexibility. And so I can work from anywhere I want. And if I can work from anywhere I want, I can work in lower cost areas. So, you know, if I make $10,000 a month, that's not enough to live in San Francisco or Manhattan the way I want to live, but it's plenty enough if I'm cool with living in like Buenos Aires or like Uruguay or something like that, which I am, right? Because I speak Spanish. I learned Spanish as a minor league baseball player. I speak Spanish with the workers who are doing construction at my house. And if I lived in a South American country, I would be fluent in 3 months. And so when you're thinking about freedom, most people's idea of freedom is, oh, I'm going to have $5 million. I'm going to have $10 million. And it's like, yeah, that's true. Like you'll definitely have more freedom if you have that net worth. But if you're smart and creative, you can pivot a lot earlier and have that same freedom with a much smaller net worth.
Do you think, so it seems like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you made that decision for like lifestyle reasons in some regards. You think there are a lot of other people out there who are thinking about making that type of decision, but are just afraid to do it?
Yes. Nobody wants to work for corporations. Very few people want to work for corporations. They don't know how to do is put the effort in to build a brand while they have their job, right? Because I was lucky in the sense that Twitter is a lower touch platform to create content on. So it's not like I was trying to start a YouTube channel where I need to spend a ton of time creating videos, editing them, you know, this, that, and the other thing, or even Instagram. Like you got to spend a lot of time figuring out how to take the right aesthetics, learn the algorithm a little bit. Twitter was just like, it was literally in line with my workday. Hey, I figured out how to get ripped without putting in half the effort that people think I need to. Let me just document it. Oh, I'm eating this for breakfast. What's fucking awesome, because it is. And this is why I'm eating this food. And this is why it's not going to make me fat, even though you're eating what you think is the same version, but it's not the same version and it's making you fat. And so for the first 6 months, it was just like documenting what I did. And it was easy to document what I did. And then the other thing is I realized ahead of time, because I've gone through training cycles where, you know, sometimes training sucks, particularly when you're younger and you're just getting into it. You just need to push through it until your body, you know, learns how to lift weights. And most people, or a lot of people, stop in that process because they're just not getting the results that they want to get. But I realized, you know, every successful endeavor has a learning curve where in the beginning you put work in and you get like no response. And then that continues until you get some sort of uptake. And so my first 6 months, you know, I didn't even have 1,000 followers my first 6 months, but I just kept creating content, convince myself that, well, I just did the same thing I do with training. It's progressive overload. Oh, I got 10 followers yesterday. Let me get 11 followers more today. Let me get 12 followers more the next day. Let me get 13 followers more the next day. And so, you know, figuring out how to set goals that keep yourself motivated is very helpful, not just in training, but in life. Because most people, like one thing that my programming, both from a fitness and business standpoint, does really well is it matches the input and the output. You know, the juice must be worth the squeeze for most people to continue. And most people like blow their load in the beginning and then they have no energy left. It's emotionally draining for them. Where for me, I just know I need to have a very hard mindset for the first several months because it's going to be all work and no dopamine. I need to understand that. Once I've understood this, then it's just like a race. It's like I'm just running 4 miles. Like I used to do 4-mile death runs every morning and just try to run as fast as I could in my late 20s. Like literally, that's just what I trained myself to do because I thought, well, if I'm going to like work for myself, I need to be able to push myself. Nobody else is going to be pushing me, so I got to push myself.
Yeah.
And most people can't do that. And so because they can't do that, they give up too early. And they'll convince, oh, next year I'll do this, next quarter I'll do this, and it never happens. And they get married, they have kids, and then all of a sudden they need to make $250,000 a year to pay the mortgage that they owe in a high tax, high cost of living jurisdiction, and then they're stuck.
Alex, for someone that's listening to this that may be working a full-time job, but they have aspirations of monetizing off the internet, off some type of a brand, do you have like tactical recommendations in terms of what someone should be looking to hit revenue wise before they actually make that jump? Should they be fully supplementing their salary that they're making? How do you feel about that?
It really depends on the individual. My buddy Zach Hummel started his own business with $732 in the bank. I had quite a bit more than $732 in the bank when I started mine. And I had a business that was generating, like when I went full time on it, my business was already doing over $10,000 a month. So it wasn't like I was taking a huge gamble. Oh, is this going to work? It's like, no, it's already working. Like, let me see if I can make it bigger. And so there isn't a clear number. Obviously you want to be in a position where if you don't sell anything for a couple months, you're not bankrupt, right? But not everybody is in that position, right? So it depends like how lean you can live. There's just not a single number. What I will say for a lot of people who have ideas that, what do I do? How do I like create a brand? What I do is, I tell people that what is it that makes you weird and that you're good at, that everybody thinks is weird about you. And chances are it's fairly unique, and you're not going to have that much competition if you focus on that, because if everybody thinks it's weird, that means nobody else is doing it the way you do it, or nobody's as interested in this niche topic as you. So you probably have a good stream of content that other people would find valuable if there is other interest in the thing that makes you weird.
Yeah, it's so funny because Harry and I talk about this all the time with what we're doing with the Meat Mafia, where it's like, find me 2 other 27-year-olds that are just like writing about red meat and the weird history and stories about food. And it's like, I think it's just a very unique thing, but that perfectly fits the weirdness bucket that you're talking about.
Exactly. And so, I've had different mentees come stay with me, and they just like watch me do my day, and they're like, wait, that's your work day? Like, yeah. And the thing that I do well is I try to get everything, like I try to monetize my weirdness, right? I try to monetize my life. So it's like, that's what I do, is all my courses are just aligned with, well, this is a cheat code I figured out. Let me help you figure it out.
Right.
And a lot of people spend time, this is weird. Let me try to be normal. It's like, no, make money off your weirdness, right? Get paid to be you. If you're not a drone, like the people who want to break out of corporate America typically are not drones. Drones don't want to break out of corporate America. They like the security. They don't even realize that it's a prison. So you can state if you don't realize you're imprisoned. They just think everybody does it, and anything different is too scary. Fine. They're not going to be the ones who are the entrepreneurs. The ones who are the entrepreneurs need to be the ones who are both weird and get paid for their weirdness. And that's the easiest way to live. Why would you try to eliminate the thing that makes you weird if you can make money on it?
Yeah, it's such a good point, because like Brett and I were living together in the fall, and we both, like, the weirdness in both of us was just being amplified because we were training for this event that like none of our other friends would have wanted to be a part of. And we were just going full bore into this Ironman and like talking about eating red meat and cooking and all that shit. And like we were geeking out about it, but we know no one else could really relate. And so, yeah, I think I'm curious, when did you sort of have that realization? Was it as you were starting to coach, or was it as you just like, you're like, I'm done with the corporate life, I'm leaning into the weirdness? Oh, sorry.
When did I have which exact realization?
The realization that like the value in what you could bring to the world was leaning into your weirdness, and like,
That was more my third month or so when I was doing it full time. Was, I was, on social media, you look for ways to increase engagement. And, at the time, my revenue was closer to 10,000 than 20,000, or my monthly income. And so obviously I wanted to grow it because, to replace the tech income that I had, I would need to. And, I realized like I have a lot of weird thoughts in my head. Tell other people these weird thoughts because they're funny. I think they're funny. Some people don't get them, but, and so, I just tweet about like COVID, about Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, like whatever, politics. People say don't tweet about politics. I'm like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to say whatever it is I'm thinking. And I know that nobody thinks the way I think. People can think close to me, but nobody thinks exactly the way I think. And it started getting a lot of engagement. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting engagement. I'm putting less effort in restraining myself, and I'm greater reward from it. And these are how I find shortcuts in life. Is anything that I get a superior outcome with less effort is something I want to do more of.
100%. I've never heard it said that way. I like that.
Well, most people think it's an aberration or just, oh, I got lucky. It's like, no, that's a thing. Drill deep dive into that. Drill into that.
You're good at it. You're better than most if that's the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the concept too of you saying like people telling you not to tweet about politics or don't tweet about that. Meanwhile, you do the contrary in your own unique voice, and it's worked incredibly well for you. I think that speaks to, it's so relatable. It's like even what we've done, people told us when we first started on Twitter in January, it was like, hey, don't start writing threads until you hit this amount of followers, or don't make your threads too long or too dense. And I'm like, literally every thread that we've written that's popped off has been like a very dense thread about the history of nutrition. And we started writing threads when we were at like 50 followers each. So it just goes to show that like, yeah, there are experts, and you should, I'm sure that they have really helpful tips and pieces of advice, but you are uniquely yourself, and there are many different ways to skin a cat and be successful.
And the other thing that people need to realize is you're mapping out a course to run, but make sure you can run that course, right? There's creating a perfect game plan if you can't execute that game plan. So yeah, maybe, threads get more engagement at a certain follower count, but if you're like really good at them and that's what you like doing, then it's going to keep you interested in staying in the game longer. So maybe you have to do it, right? And then, oh, actually you're good at it and you were able to make it work. Great, right? But when people are starting out, what I tell people to do is make sure you can sustain it for 120 days. Can't be operating in a straitjacket for 120 days. Maybe you can, but like you need to mix like work ethic and consistency with something that you can actually be consistent with, right? So similar to running a race. It's like you can't run faster than a certain speed or you'll stop, but you also need to pick a speed that you can run and then run that speed. And that's how you win.
100%. So Alex, maybe to bridge this into what you're doing now in terms of the coaching stuff. So you've got a cookbook and like some very dietary focused stuff, and then also some gym related material as well, right?
Yeah. So on the fitness side, I teach how I cook, which is very simply self-taught. I teach how I eat, also very simple, 10 easy wins for easier fat loss. Literally my diet's just 10 rules that are very easy to follow. And they don't even feel like rules, but that's just how I learned to eat. And that's how I got, 6 years old, right? Or it's like, that's better than I looked at 26 or 16. Cool.
Yep.
With less effort. and then how I train, because how I train also is a big reason for why I look the way I do. People say diet is it's mostly diet, but I disagree. I think training is just as important as diet.
Mm.
As getting the aesthetic looks that you want.
Mm.
And so I teach that. I actually teach how I do it completely in my masterclass. And then I teach people in group and one-on-one coaching, basically those things. And then on the business side, I do mentorships where I work with people who are trying to escape their corporate jobs. And then I'll also do like kind of one-off chats where different people have a specific problem that they come to me with. And usually within 20, 30 minutes, I can completely reframe how they're looking at the problem, where they're like, oh my God, the opportunity is 3 times greater than I thought it was. And I've been looking at this completely wrong because I've been stuck inside the box for so long.
Mm.
So between those, that's most of the way I'm generating income through working rather than investing. And then occasionally I'll do expert network calls, like, expert networks like Gearson Learman Group have me as an expert on Google, an expert on cryptocurrencies, and they let me bill like whatever I want. So I get like a call a month or something for like $1,000 an hour. Like, okay, cool, you can pay me that.
That's
Mhm.
sweet.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because there's obviously like, I think you're gonna have a really interesting perspective on this versus, the work harder versus work smarter methodology to working. It seems like you have a pretty awesome schedule and structure that you've consciously curated for yourself. How much work are you typically doing per day or per week?
So I do a lot of body maintenance work because I have a bad left shoulder, and
Okay.
I did it in college, and I didn't get my range of motion back, and because I didn't realize I needed to because it didn't hurt, so I like lifted heavy on it through my 20s, and all of a sudden, like in my early 30s, I couldn't move it, and so I'm like, oh, that's not good. And I'm supposed to be lifting weights until I'm in my 60s. Like, I need to be able to move my arm, and so I realized like most people think success is linear, where successful people realize that it's exponential. You need to put your effort behind things that are really, really moving, or
Mm.
things that can totally kill you, kill your revenue streams. And for me, if my shoulder mobility gets worse, that's fine. Like I don't need to bench press or something like that to have a successful business, but it can make my back dysfunctional. And if it makes my back dysfunctional, that does become a really big problem. So I spend a lot of time. I probably spend 12 hours a week. I was telling my assistant, I spend 12 hours a week on my shoulder to make sure my back doesn't get bad. Right. And I spend $1,000 a month on my shoulder to make sure my back doesn't get bad. And so most people wouldn't do that. That's how I spend a good amount of my time, plus cooking. And then, probably 3, 4 hours a day of tweeting and coaching calls. And I kind of do that every day, 7 days a week, because it's easy. I mean, it's not, it's easy relative to what most people have to do.
Do you so as you have this coaching business and your past experience is so like diverse, and a lot of your tweets I think kind of cover the spectrum, as you already said, like you'll talk political, you'll talk about economics. Do you enjoy still being engaged with that side of the world and being able to tweet out about that stuff?
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed when I was working at Google is once you started making about $250,000 a year, you had to specialize in a particular niche. And I always enjoyed working on a lot of different things,
Yeah.
which you were allowed to do as a junior employee. And so I was thinking, man, like I never stayed at Google long enough to make 250. But as I was getting closer to that threshold, I was like, I kind of just want to do a lot of things. Like I'm more of a polymath, more
Mm.
8 mile wide. There's a lot of people who know more about cooking than me. There's a lot of people who know more about Bitcoin than I do. A lot of people who know more about macroeconomics than I do. I just like to 80-20 everything. I'm like really fascinated to learn something. And then once I've gained like, sub master level proficiency, it doesn't really interest me that much anymore. But I've also, in my learning process, I figured out a much easier way to make it make sense. And so then I can teach somebody else, like, hey, if you're trying to be the best in the world, there's probably other coaches who can do better with you. But if you're trying to get the most bang for your buck, I'm really lazy, and I figured out a very fast way to do it. So I can teach you how to do that.
I love it. What's something that's happening right now? Because there's so much shit happening in the world that has got your attention that maybe you hadn't spent as much time on previously.
I don't know what's happening politically in the US. I
It's
I
so bizarre.
I shift between, is this a controlled demolition versus, oh, these people are just stupid. Like,
Yeah.
it's literally like one of those two, and I'm not sure which one it is. And then the third alternative is it is a controlled demolition, and the stupid people have been put in place by those who are looking to execute a controlled demolition, but the stupid people don't realize that they're the, the patsies that are going to be at the wheel when the controlled demolition happens. It's just going to be a byproduct of their stupid policies.
My mom literally said that to me today. She's like, are they doing this on purpose? I mean, it does feel like it's almost intentional in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And so I don't know. And that's kind of the first time in my life where it's like, these decisions are so idiotic. I literally cannot understand how a quasi-rational person could get to where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that the catalyst for you making the move from SF to Austin, like many other people have done the last 2 years?
No, it was more, 2020, I had no belief that I was going to move.
Mhm.
It was more with COVID. I decided that I'm not going to just stay walled up in my apartment. I left San Francisco in March 14th, 2020. Bought some Zoom call options like March 7th, 2020. Left March 14th. So I had an amazing March of 2020. Went up to my mom's place because she bought a house in Idaho in 2014. I thought I'd be there for like 6 weeks during the 2 weeks to slow spread, whatever. And then that turned into longer than 6 weeks. And I decided, well, I'm going to live my life. So I was working with Zach Hummel at the time, trying to get my deadlift over 500 pounds because I wanted to break the record of the deadlift record of the gym that kicked me out, because I wanted to just be like, well, fuck you guys, watch this. And so I started working more with Zach Hummel, went to Indy a lot to hang out with him and his wife. He helped me grow my account. And, from those trips, I started realizing like, oh, wow, I'm making like $25,000 a quarter doing this. Is that something I can live on? Well, let me see if I can do that for another quarter. Oh, I did it for 2 quarters. And then by the time 2021 started, it was like, all right, Bitcoin's over 40,000, over 50,000, hit 60,000. My online business is doing over 10,000 a month. Well, where's the best place in the country to take advantage of that? It's probably Austin, Texas. I was kind of thinking about Miami, but Miami was a little bit expensive relative to Austin if I wanted to buy a house. And so I'm like, well, I'll go to Austin. That's where it's going to be.
Yeah. How have you found it so far? It's like, me being down here, I've found it to just be like a great place to meet people who are doing almost exactly what you're doing. So I'm curious if you've had a similar experience.
Yeah, I have. I've been a little bit walled up, with my own stuff. Like I've remodeled my house for the last year, so that's taken a lot of time away from me. I literally don't understand how normal people with normal jobs live life, because, it's like I'm fortunate that I have some savings and like all my home improvement projects run over, right? So I'm spending an extra few $1,000 here and there, and so I want to do that, but I guess I have to. And it's time consuming because I need to make sure the workers do a good job. Otherwise I'm paying for bad work, and nobody else is going to look over it the way, with the level of attention that I'm looking over it. So that is a part-time job. Then with what I'm doing with my online business, that's also a part-time job, quasi full-time job. I'm gonna say part-time job. And then with, how I try to rehab my body to make sure I'm in a position to keep training at a high level, into my 50s is also another part-time job. So I have 3 part-time jobs. And so my social life in Austin it's not been zero, but I haven't been like hitting the bars 3 nights a week, let's just say.
Right.
Whereas if I were here in my 20s, I'd absolutely be hitting the bars like 4 nights a week.
Right.
We'll leave that to Medici 2.0, because I think he gets after it, what I hear.
He does.
That's awesome though. I feel like, so really how the Meat Mafia was born was, so Harry and I did an Ironman we did Ironman Waco. So as part of that, we got an Airbnb for 3 months, and Harry stayed in Austin. I'm doing a stint in San Diego, and I'm moving back full time at the end of the year. But we were amazed at just just the purpose of the average person that you bump paths with. It's such an interesting blend of people that are, into fitness, they're into being outdoors. There's a great art scene. There's also people that are just very intentional about wanting to be there. It seems like almost everyone's a transplant. And I've never just met, like even just going to Squatch, right? The people that you bump into there, it's just like the coolest group of people that are all pushing each other.
Well, Squatch has been very intentional about how they're building their gym.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I connected the owner with Zach Homel because Squatch reminds me a lot of Iron Valley Barbell in terms of their commitment to building a good atmosphere. And when Zach comes to Austin, he loves going to Squatch. That's his place. Like obviously, him and Jason, the Squatch owner, are very similar in that regard. And so it's no surprise that you have a lot of young, highly motivated people who are training there. It's a great thing to experience, and I don't know how long it can last. Usually, these things don't last for longer than a decade, right?
Mhm.
At some point, the people who have this motivation become quite successful, and then as they become quite successful, they start hiring other people. They have businesses that scale. And then when you have a scale business, what happened to Silicon Valley is you need to find employees who graduated from elite schools. So at that point, when you go from having a 10-person company to a 1,000-person company, all of a sudden the composition of your employees shifts from libertarian to liberal, right? Byproduct of having to do scaled university recruiting. And so when that happens, that gets injected into local politics, as well as like the Marxist element of liberalism. And then you start seeing a devolution like you're seeing in San Francisco right now.
Mm.
Yeah, it's an amazing point. But I feel like Austin, yeah, maybe because I've always said, and you just had me thinking a little bit differently. Like I've always said Austin might be Silicon Valley 2.0, but to your point, I think most people in Austin are kind of libertarian. They might just be happy growing to the 10-person business and like not scaling it to the 1,000-person business, and just being someone who has like maybe one or two businesses or one successful small business that they just run in Austin.
You would think so, but what happens at that point is other entrepreneurs will come in and say, hey, you don't want to scale your business from 10 to 100, but let me show you how to do it easily.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, well, if I can make more money working the same hours, like, why not?
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a way for them to scale. It's just not going to necessarily be the same way that was done 10 years ago in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Are there as a coach, are there any resources that you've used or gone back to, like a book, podcast, YouTube video, that you think is particularly valuable?
I like Mike Matthews, Bigger, Leaner, Stronger. His
Okay.
book influenced a lot of how I approach training. From a training standpoint, that's mainly it. Everything else is self-taught.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even from a work approach standpoint, everything that I don't really think there's that many career coaches who tell people to do the things that I tell people. I tell people to not like just get paid as much money as you can, like figure it out. Like I don't tell people to, oh, you got a client, you got to pay your dues. Not at all. Don't pay your dues. Let somebody else pay their dues. Let them pay their dues to you, right? Don't do that. So I think a more adversarial approach to how corporate government works. It's like they're trying to take advantage of you. You may as well try to take advantage of them, unless you're okay with working, in a disadvantageous position, because you are at a disadvantageous position as an employee. But there's ways to get out of that disadvantageous position to put them in a disadvantageous position. Do you want to do that? Because I can teach you how to do that. I've personally been able to mitigate a lot of stress in my life by doing that. I've always approached work, as sort of like, well, how can they take advantage of me, and how can I make sure that they don't take advantage of me? And the byproduct is I've never been taken advantage of.
One of the things you said earlier was you mentioned like your interviews, your interview prep, you were very intentional about like the way you looked, the way you spoke. I think the way you speak, like your voice is just like very like clear and articulate. Is there anything that you've done in the past that's like gotten you to that point that you think like maybe other people would benefit from?
I pay attention to magicians. right? And my college coach was a magician in that regard. He is a very, very good speaker. And I saw the way he would get people to do things for him in ways that other people couldn't do. And so anytime I see like this guy is able to accomplish things that I think are impossible, I pay very close attention to how they communicate. And inevitably, some of it gets replicated. And so I paid very close attention to how effective communicators speak, because I figured this is the easiest way for me to make more money with the same amount of work.
It comes across clear as day. I mean, I feel like the way you speak, it just like is on a dime, and I think obviously your past speaks for itself.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and people, one of my clients is like, dude, you should launch a podcast. I'm like, okay, I will.
Yeah.
Talking, it's easy for me. And
are you thinking about doing that?
yeah, I'll do it in June.
Okay.
Because conversations like these are fun. I don't have to prepare much for them, and it helps reach newer audiences, which is essential for my business growth. And so, I think that is a gift that I have, right? Where I paid close attention to good speakers, but my dad has a pretty solid vocabulary himself. And so, combining cadence with a decent vocabulary with a breadth of knowledge means I can, say interesting things for, in long form discussions. Most people can't do that. And I don't really know why, but I know that I can, and I know that it's fun for me.
Yeah.
So, well, in line with my other work smart as much as you can, so you don't have to work hard strategies is, oh, well, I'm pretty good at this. It's not hard. Let me go figure out how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, we love talking with people like you that just have a very unique ideology for the way that you approach life, mentally, physically, spiritually, etc. I feel like I have like 30 nuggets that I've picked out of this conversation, and I'm going to go back and re-listen to it. And I very well may take you up on a call to figure out how to make sure that, my corporate job isn't taking advantage of me and mitigating stress. Cause I think I would love that.
Do it. I'm like, your mind will be blown to the same extent that it has been over the last 50 minutes or so.
Okay. Well, I'm literally around tomorrow, so not to put you on the spot, but I would be down to connect with you then. So
we'll DM on it.
Yeah.
Let me kick you out to next week, but we can definitely.
That's fine. That's fine. But so is Twitter's the best way for people to connect with you, just to learn a little bit more about what you're doing and your approach and all that good stuff, Alex?
At Alex Feinberg 1. That's right.
Awesome. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, brother. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Appreciate you doing this. And we would love to have you back on anytime you want to chop it up for some more.
I would love to join again. Thanks, guys.
Oh yeah. Thanks, Alex.